Hey, welcome back to class. I want to give some feedback to the process of detailed observation. This is a video for beginning students after you've done a couple of detailed observations. And let me just make some general points that will help you to go even deeper in your work and to avoid some of the pitfalls that you run into in beginnings. Now, of course, one of the key pieces is remember to continue to pray, Lord, astonish me. Because what we're looking for with detailed observation isn't to do what just anybody could do. We're working to be able to deeply get underneath the surface of the scripture so the scriptures can really come alive and speak to us so that they can ultimately speak to our audience, whether we're teaching or preaching or maybe sharing a text in a counseling place. But we're trying to get a deep, penetrating look at the word. So don't be content with superficiality. I'll say more about that. One of the first things that I want to caution you about is make sure you're not doing premature application in your work. What I mean by that is many students will say things like this text says to us or to me or we can see. No, we can't, right? The text is not addressing us. And so avoid first person language. This is going to be true in interpretation. Until we get to the point where we're actually making application, you need to try to observe the text objectively as though it's an object and you're the subject. That's critical to do this right. Otherwise, you rush ahead and you're already skipping to the very end of the process and you're probably missing something. There's a great quotation by Neil deGrasse Tyson, that goes this way. It says, one of the greatest challenges in life is knowing enough to think you're right, but not enough to know you're wrong. Think about that a little bit as we're doing our work this semester, and make sure that you're putting the effort in to not jump ahead to simply instantly applying a text, okay? Second, don't focus only on words. Simply saying, I observe this word shows up in the passage, that is an observation, but it's very low level. Now, what I suggest to do with words is pick out the words that are obviously important and maybe make a list of them and ask some questions. But that can either be the end of the process or the very beginning. Don't make all of your observations just about individual words, or you're really not getting anywhere at all in this other than begging the question, what do all these words mean? And especially don't bother with insignificant words like the or and or but, words that obviously have a certain kind of a meaning, right? So focus on the obviously significant, important words. When you get stuck and you don't know what to do, pull out a couple different English translations and observe the differences between them. That will give you some different kinds of observations. And if at some level, if you're noticing what's different, that's going to take you a lot further down the road than simply quoting the text and trying to ask questions. So when in doubt, compare, contrast several different English translations, or if you speak a different language, you can bring that translation into the process as well. Do your work in several sittings. So make several pass-throughs the text. Don't just go through it one time and think you're done. You want to think of detailed observation as like you've washed your car and you're trying to get all of the soap out of your sponge. You know, anybody can give it one twist and a bunch of water and soap comes out. You want to keep wringing that sponge over and over again until you get every last drop. That's what our goal is, to see what's in the text. Start with the obvious, and the more obvious types of observations you make, you'll start slowly getting deeper and deeper into the meat and the heart of the text, which is why you don't want to be content with simply superficial work, right? If essentially anybody could turn in what you've just turned in, that isn't the quality that we want at a graduate level of inductive Bible study, or for that matter, if you're a lay person who's teaching a Sunday school class. if anybody could see what you've seen, you probably haven't dug into the text deep enough. So make several more passes. Don't be content with being superficial. If we want to become profound, confident, and substantive interpreters of the word, you got to dig deep. So give yourself sufficient time to not simply be limited to superficial findings. And the only way to get better is to practice this. Now, make sure when you make your observations that you're actually asking all three types of questions. Yes, that can be repetitive and can sometimes seem tedious when you're starting out an inductive Bible study, but this is that Karate Kid piece: wax on, wax off, paint the fence, sand the floor. What we're doing is we're creating new pathways in our mind so that when we make observations, when we're reading the scripture, we're going to be automatically generating these types of questions, because questions are what are going to lead us even deeper into the text. Now, what kind of observation should you be making? Again, you can, and I mentioned this in class, and it's in several of the videos, but just think, you want to make observations about the paragraph as a whole that you're observing. You can make verse as a whole observations, sentence as a whole, clause as a whole, phrases, and then all the way down to individual words. So work systematically and effectively to see the whole picture and then the smaller components. Think of it as kind of like a Russian doll, if you will. You want to observe each element, each different part of that Russian doll, and keep opening it up until you're down simply to the individual words. When you don't know what to do, make labels. Label something. This is inclusive scope. Dissect the passage. What do you see? Paraphrase, categorize. You want to say something about the text. Use that handout that I gave you on suggestions for improving your work. Review that. You can go back to our textbooks, look at the examples that I have put into our class. If you're watching this and you're not in my class, you can email me, deepdivespirituality@gmail.com, and I'll send you some handouts if that would help you. If you're in your class, obviously you just respond to me through our typical Canvas channels. And the last thing is, just don't give up, right? Think about Jacob. Jacob wrestling God. He held on because he wanted a blessing. Hold on. Keep digging. You're going to be glad you did. And even more importantly, the people that you have the privilege of teaching, preaching, serving, ministering to will be really glad that their pastor, their teacher, their counselor loved them enough that they spent the time to dig really deep in the Word. It's going to be good for your soul too, because in the midst of all the work, guess what? You're going to encounter the living Lord of the text, the one who inspired the text, the one who's continued to work in our lives to apply the text in us. That's what this is all about, folks. Be astonished by the Word so that you can be astonishing. If you have any questions, let me know. It's my privilege to be your teacher of inductive Bible studies.